The lake was gone. Before sunrise. Not low. Not receding. Gone. The air smelled like wet metal. And rot. Thick. Wrong. I stood on cracked mud, where 12 feet of water used to sit, and the silence felt louder than any crowd. But the banners? Still up. Annual Willowbrook Fishing Derby. Bright. Perfect. Waiting for water. That didn't exist anymore. People would be here in hours. And none of them knew what I'd just done. I could still hear it. The valve. That deep metal groan. Slow. Heavy. Like something waking up. After years of sleep. I didn't rush it. I let it turn. Inch by inch. Until the pressure shifted. That was the moment. Everything changed. But that's not where this started. It started with a lock. Cheap. Steel. Bolted into my shoreline. Like it had always belonged there. I remember the sound. When I hit it. Hollow. Temporary. Fake authority. Pretending to be permanent. A sign hung beside it. Private access. HOA residents only. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Just to be sure. My name wasn't on that sign. But this lake? Was. Always had been. 3 generations. My grandfather dug the first basin. Rented equipment. And stubborn pride. My father reinforced the dam. After a storm nearly wiped it out. And me? I maintained it. Quietly. Legally. Every permit filed. Every inspection passed. There's a smell to fresh water. When it's done right. Clean. Balanced. Alive. That smell was gone. The day they showed up. Diesel fumes replaced it. Plastic signs. Folding tables. Smiling people. Who had no idea whose ground they were standing on. I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just watched. Margaret Whitmore stood near the dock. Clipboard in hand. Greeting people. Like she owned the place. White linen shirt. Perfect posture. That kind of smile. That never quite reaches the eyes. She didn't look surprised to see me. That was the first red flag. "You must be Ethan," she said. Like she'd been expecting me. I didn't answer. I was looking at the dock. They extended it. Added railings. Painted it white. Covered the original wood. My father sealed by hand. I ran my fingers along the edge. Fresh paint. Still tacky. They didn't even wait. That told me everything. "We've improved the property," she said. Softer this time. Improved. That word sat wrong. Like a splinter. "You can't reach." I asked one question. Just one. "Who gave you permission?" She didn't hesitate. Didn't blink. The community needed access. Not an answer. A move. That's when I saw the tickets. Printed. Stacked. $25 per person. Private lake experience. They were selling something they didn't own. Out in the open. No hesitation. I looked past her. Past the tables. Past the people. Straight to the waterline. It had already dropped. Just a few inches. Not enough for them to notice. But I did. I always do. Water doesn't lie. It shifts. It reacts. And right then, it was telling me something. Something was off. Margaret followed my gaze. Just for a second. Then smiled again. "Big turnout tomorrow." Of course. Fishing derby. That explained everything. The rush. The setup. The timing. They weren't just taking access. They were staging an event. On my lake. Without me. I nodded. Slow. Like I understood. Like I agreed. But I didn't. Not even close. Because beneath that water. Beneath everything they thought. They controlled. There was something else. Something they never checked. Something tied to that valve. Something that doesn't care about signs, or tickets, or HOA rules. And when the lake disappears, it doesn't just leave mud behind. It exposes everything, including the one thing they were counting on: staying hidden. I walked the shoreline slow, boots sinking slightly into the damp edge where water had pulled back just enough to notice. Most people would not see it. They would see a full lake, calm, still, ready for tomorrow. But I saw the line. That faint ring of darker soil, just inches below where it should be. The lake was already responding, and it had not rained in weeks. That mattered. Water levels do not shift without a reason. Not here. Not on a system I have monitored my entire life. I crouched down and pressed my fingers into the mud. Cool. Freshly exposed. Too fresh. Something upstream had not changed. That meant only one thing. Pressure had been building. Not releasing. Not yet. I stood up and looked back toward the gate. A small group had gathered, laughing, holding printed tickets. One guy pointed toward the dock like he was already picturing himself catching something big. He had no idea the water under that dock was already moving differently. That was the second red flag. I checked the inflow channel next. A narrow cut that feeds the lake from the north ridge. The trickle was steady. Clean. No debris. No blockage. Everything upstream was normal. Which meant whatever was about to happen was not coming from there. I followed the curve of the shoreline until I reached the far side. The side most people ignore. No dock. No clear path. Just brush and the old service trail my father used when he inspected the dam. The air felt different there. Quieter. Heavier. Like sound did not travel the same way. I could hear something faint. A low hum. Not mechanical. Not exactly. More like tension. Like water pressing against something that had not moved in a long time. I stopped walking. That sound should not have been there. Not unless the system was under load. I glanced up toward the dam. From a distance, it looked untouched. Same slope. Same grass. But I knew better. I always checked the details. The spillway edge had a slight discoloration. A thin line where moisture had started to creep through. Not a leak. Not yet. But close enough to notice. Close enough to matter. I stepped closer and felt the ground under my boots. Firm. Stable. No shift. No give. Structurally, it was fine. That was not the problem. The problem was behind it. I walked down toward the access panel. Hidden. Half buried. Exactly where it had always been. They had not touched it. That was almost funny. They built gates. Sold tickets. Painted docks. But they never looked under the surface. I brushed dirt off the metal cover with my boot. The lock was still there. Old. Scratched. Mine. I ran my hand over it and felt that familiar weight settle in my chest. This was never about access. This was about control. And they had just stepped into a system they did not understand. I straightened up and looked back toward the main area again. More cars now. More noise. More confidence. Margaret stood in the center of it all, giving directions like she had already won something. She had not even asked the one question that mattered. Not once. I turned back to the panel and listened again. The hum was still there. Steady. Patient. Waiting. And for the first time, I realized something that made me pause. They were not just using the lake. They were relying on it. I did not open the panel right away. I just stood there with my hand resting on the metal, feeling that faint vibration travel up through my fingers. It was subtle, but it was there. Pressure. Contained. Waiting for a release that had not come yet. That system had been quiet for years. I made sure of that. Controlled. Balanced. But now it was holding more than it should. I stepped back and looked across the lake again. The surface still looked calm from here. Smooth. Reflective. Like nothing underneath had changed. That was the part most people never understand. Water can look peaceful right before it shifts. I checked my watch. Late afternoon. The sun was dropping just enough to cast long shadows across the shoreline. By this time tomorrow, this place would be packed. Families. Coolers. Kids running across that dock they just painted. Lines cast into water that was already starting to behave differently. I exhaled slowly and walked back toward the main path. A pickup truck rolled in behind me, tires crunching over gravel that used to be part of my access road. The driver hopped out, smiling, holding a printed receipt. He nodded at me like we were both guests. That almost made me laugh. Almost. A temporary sign had been pushed into the ground near the gate. "Check in here." Arrow pointing toward a folding table. I followed it. Not because I needed to. Because I wanted to see how far this had gone. A teenager handed out wristbands. Bright blue. Cheap plastic. "You here for the derby?" he asked. I looked at the band. Then at the lake behind him. Then back at him. "Something like that," I said. He did not question it. Why would he? To him, this was just another event. Organized. Approved. Normal. That was the problem. Margaret stood a few feet away, talking to a couple about prize categories. Biggest catch. Fastest catch. She had it all planned out. Structured. Confident. I stepped closer. Close enough to hear every word. Close enough for her to notice me again. She did. That same smile. Slight tilt of her head. Like she was humoring a concern she had already dismissed. "We are expecting over 100 participants," she said, not even breaking eye contact with the couple. "It is going to be a great day for the community." Community. That word again. I looked past her to the waterline. Another inch lower. Maybe two. Still subtle. Still invisible to anyone not watching for it. But it was happening faster now. That told me the system had reached a threshold. Once it starts shifting, it does not stop on its own. Not without intervention. Margaret finished her sentence and turned fully toward me. "If you are interested in participating, there is still time to register." I let that sit for a second. Then I asked her something simple. "Did you check the water permits?" Her smile flickered. Just for a fraction of a second. There it was. The gap. "All of our paperwork is in order," she replied. Smooth. Practiced. But not specific. Never specific. I nodded slowly. That was all I needed to hear. Because if she had checked, she would have asked a different question. I stepped back from the table and looked out across the lake one more time. The surface caught the last light of the day. Golden. Still. Almost perfect. But I could hear it now. Faint. Deep. That same tension from earlier. Building. Waiting. And Margaret was still selling access to something she did not control. I turned away from the crowd and headed back toward the dam. The air felt heavier with every step. Like the lake itself was holding its breath. And I was the only one who knew why. I reached the dam just as the last of the daylight slipped behind the trees. The air cooled fast here. It always did. The kind of cold that settles low and stays. I stood at the edge and listened again. That low-pressure hum had grown stronger. Not louder. Just heavier. Like something was leaning harder against a door that had not been opened in years. I walked along the crest, boots pressing. Into packed dirt that had held steady for decades. No cracks. No shift. Structurally, it was sound. That mattered. Because if this moved, it would move exactly how it was designed to. I stopped near the spillway and looked down. The concrete lip was damp now. A thin sheen of water creeping over the edge where it had been dry that morning. That was new. And it was not supposed to happen without a trigger. I crouched and ran my hand along the surface. Cool. Slick, fresh movement. The system was reaching its limit. I stood back up and looked toward the lake again. From here, I could see the full stretch. The dock. The banners. The people still setting up lights for tomorrow. It all looked so organized. So temporary. Like a stage built on something that was already shifting underneath. I checked my watch again. Less than 20 hours until the event. That number mattered now. Timing always matters when you are dealing with water. Too early, and nothing changes. Too late, and you lose control of the outcome. I walked down the narrow path to the access panel again. Each step felt more deliberate. The kind of steps you take when you already know what is coming, but you still need to confirm it. The metal cover sat where it always had. Half buried. Ignored. I knelt and brushed off the remaining dirt. The lock stared back at me. Worn. Scratched. Familiar. I pulled the key from my pocket. It had weight to it. Not just metal. History. My father handed it to me years ago without saying much. Just a quiet nod. Like he knew I would understand when the time came. I turned the key slightly. Not enough to open it. Just enough to feel the mechanism respond. Still smooth. Still intact. That told me everything inside was untouched. They had built an entire operation above ground and never once checked below it. I paused there for a moment. Listening. Feeling. The pressure was steady now. Not rising. Not falling. Waiting. That was the part that made me stop. Systems do not wait unless something external is about to act on them. I looked back toward the lake one more time. The surface caught the last light, but the edges were darker now. The waterline had dropped again. Faster this time. Anyone paying attention would have noticed. But no one was paying attention. They were focused on tomorrow. On the event. On the idea that this place belonged to them for a day. I stood up slowly and slipped the key back into my pocket. Not yet. Not tonight. Timing was not right. I needed them fully committed. Fully invested. That is when people stop questioning things. That is when they assume everything is under control. I walked back up the path, the sound of distant voices carrying across the water. Laughter. Music. Confidence. Margaret's voice cut through it occasionally. Sharp. Certain. She believed this was already hers. That belief was going to matter. Because once people believe something is theirs, they stop looking for the truth underneath. I reached the top of the path and stopped. The hum behind me had not changed. Still steady. Still waiting. And for the first time, I realized something else. Tomorrow was not just an event. It was their proof. And they were building it on something they did not understand. I did not go home that night. I stayed close. Close enough to hear the lake breathe. The crowd thinned out as the sky went dark, but a few lights stayed on near the dock. Generators hummed. Music drifted low across the water. It felt wrong hearing that sound here. This place was never loud. Never staged. I walked the outer trail, keeping distance, watching how they moved. Volunteers carried coolers. Someone set up a row of folding chairs facing the shoreline like it was a show. That part stuck with me. They were not just using the lake. They were presenting it. Selling an experience built on something they did not own. Around 10 o'clock, Margaret did one last walk through. Clipboard still in hand. Same posture. Same calm control. She checked the gate. Checked the tables. Spoke to a man adjusting a banner that kept catching the wind. Everything had a place. Everything had a plan. Except the part she never looked at. I circled back toward the dam again, slower this time. The night air carried sound differently. The hum was clearer now. Deeper. More constant. I stopped halfway down the path and just listened. No wind. No movement. Just that. Pressure holding steady behind concrete and earth. That system had waited years without needing a release. But tonight it felt different. Like it was aware something had changed above it. I reached the access panel and crouched down. The metal felt colder now, heavier somehow. I pressed my palm against it and felt the faint vibration again. Not imagined. Not subtle anymore. It was real. I pulled the key out and held it there without moving. This was the point where most people hesitate. Not because they do not know what to do, but because they understand what it means once they do it. Timing. That word kept coming back. I checked my watch. 11:23. Less than 12 hours until sunrise. Less than 12 hours until 100 people showed up expecting something that would not be there. I stood up and looked back toward the lake again. The lights reflected across the surface, but the edges had pulled back even more. The shoreline was wider now, darker, the kind of detail that disappears under artificial light. They would not see it tonight, but they would feel it tomorrow. I walked back toward the main area one last time, not to confront anyone, just to confirm something. The gate was closed now, locked from the inside. A printed sign taped across it. Event staff only. I reached out and touched the chain. Cold. Tense. Like it had been pulled too tight. A security guard leaned back in a folding chair nearby, half paying attention. He glanced at me, then away. To him, I was just another outsider. That part almost worked in my favor. I stepped back and looked through the gaps in the metal. The lake sat there under the lights. Quiet. Still. But I could see the difference now. The reflection did not reach as far as it should. The waterline had dropped again. Inches. Maybe more. Faster than before. That was it. The system was no longer holding evenly. It was ready. I turned away from the gate and walked back toward the dam without stopping. The noise faded behind me. The music. The voices. The confidence. All of it stayed on that side. Out here, it was just me and the sound of pressure waiting for a decision. I reached the panel again and did not pause. This time, the key slid in clean. The lock turned with a dull click that sounded louder than it should have. I lifted the cover just enough to see inside. The wheel sat there. Steel. Solid. Untouched. Exactly where it had always been. I wrapped my hand around it and felt the weight. It did not move yet. I did not force it. Not until I was sure. I closed my eyes for a second and listened to everything around me. The distant laughter. The hum behind the wall. The stillness in the air. Then I opened them again and tightened my grip. Because once this started, it would not stop on its own. I did not rush it. I tightened my grip on the wheel and felt the resistance push back into my palm. Solid. Locked by years of stillness. That was expected. Systems like this do not move easily after sitting idle. They remember the last position. They hold it. I leaned in slightly and applied steady pressure. Not force. Just enough to test it. The metal answered with a low creak. Slow. Reluctant. But it moved. That was all I needed. I stopped right there. Did not turn it further. Not yet. Timing still mattered. I closed the panel halfway and stood up, letting the night settle around me again. The hum behind the dam had shifted. Barely. But enough to notice. Like it recognized the change. I stepped back and looked toward the lake again. The surface still reflected the lights, but the shape was different now. The edges pulled tighter. The center looked deeper. Uneven. That meant pressure was redistributing. Quietly. Underneath everything they had set up. I checked my watch again. 11:47. Minutes were starting to matter. Every adjustment from here would carry forward. I walked up to the crest one more time and stood there, hands resting on the cool railing. The air had gone completely still. No wind. No insects. Just that heavy quiet that comes before something shifts. I could hear distant laughter again. Someone had turned the music back up. A bass line carried across the water, vibrating faintly through the ground under my boots. It felt out of place. Artificial. like they were trying to fill a silence they did not understand. I stayed there for a while, watching, measuring, waiting for the exact moment when everything lined up. Not too early, not too late. Around midnight, the lights near the dock dimmed slightly. Fewer people now. Only staff remained. Cleaning up. Resetting for morning. Margaret was still there. I could see her silhouette near the table, going over something with another volunteer. She had not left once. That told me how invested she was. This was not just an event for her. This was proof. Proof that she could take something and redefine it without permission. I stepped away from the railing and headed back down the path. The panel was waiting, exactly where I left it. I opened it fully this time. The wheel caught the light. Dull steel. No shine. No decoration. Just function. I wrapped both hands around it. This time, I did not test it. I committed. Slow at first. A controlled turn. The metal groaned louder now. Deeper. The kind of sound that travels through structure, not air. I felt it in my arms. In my chest. The system responded immediately. The hum behind the dam shifted into something more active. Movement. Subtle, but real. Water was beginning to respond to the change. I paused for a second, holding the wheel in place. Listening. Confirming. Then I continued. Another turn. Slow. Steady. Each inch mattered. Each movement calculated. This was not about speed. This was about control. I did not open it all at once. That would have been careless. Instead, I set the release gradually. Enough to start the process. Enough to let the system do the rest over time. I stepped back and let go of the wheel. It held its position, locked into the new setting. I closed the panel and secured it again, the click of the lock final and clean. The hum behind the dam had changed completely now. No longer just pressure. Now it was flow. Controlled. Directed. Quiet. I walked back up to the crest and looked out across the lake one more time. Nothing dramatic yet. No sudden drop. No visible shift. Just a surface that looked slightly different if you knew where to look. That was the point. It would not happen all at once. It would take hours. Slow enough to go unnoticed in the dark. Fast enough to matter by morning. I turned away from the water and started up the trail, leaving the dam behind me. The music had stopped completely now. The lights were fading. The lake sat in silence again, but it was not the same silence as before. Something had started. Something they could not see yet. And by the time they did, it would already be too late to stop it. I did not sleep. I stayed in the truck parked just beyond the ridge, where I could see the outline of the lake but not be seen from the gate. The engine ticked as it cooled, then everything went quiet. Real quiet. The kind of silence that only shows up when something underneath is already in motion. Around 2 in the morning, I stepped out and walked back toward the overlook. The air had changed. Cooler. Damp in a different way. Not surface moisture. Movement. I could smell it. That faint mineral scent of exposed earth starting to breathe. I stopped halfway and looked out across the water. The reflection was shorter now. Noticeably shorter. The lights near the dock no longer stretched as far. That meant the drop had accelerated. Not fast enough to panic anyone, but fast enough to matter by daylight. I checked the shoreline through the darkness. The edges were wider. Mud starting to show where water had been hours ago. Smooth at first. Then broken. Thin cracks forming like a pattern spreading outward. That was the first visible sign. I listened again. The hum from earlier had changed into something else. A low pull. Constant. Like water sliding through a space it had not touched in years. It was working exactly how it was designed to. Controlled release. No noise. No spectacle. Just quiet correction. I walked closer to the dam but did not go all the way down. I did not need to. I could feel it from here. The system was stable. Balanced. doing the job it was built for long before any of this started. I leaned against a tree and watched the lake reshape itself in real time. Not dramatic, not sudden, just steady, relentless. By 3:30, the dock looked different. Still floating, but lower. The angle slightly off. Something only a careful eye would catch. The painted boards caught less light. The reflection beneath them broken. That detail mattered. That dock had been extended without understanding the water beneath it. Now it was starting to show. Around 4, the first truck pulled in. Early staff. Headlights cut across the surface and revealed more than the night had. The shoreline was exposed now. Not fully, but enough to notice if you were paying attention. They were not. The driver stepped out, stretched, and walked straight toward the setup area without even looking at the water. That was the third red flag. People only see what they expect to see, and they expected a full lake. I checked my watch. 4:12. Sunrise was coming fast. Light changes everything. It reveals edges, depth, absence. I moved a little higher up the ridge, giving myself a wider view. The eastern sky started to lighten. Just a faint line at first. Then more. As the light spread, the truth came with it. The waterline pulled back another foot. Then another. Not all at once, but enough that the shape of the lake was clearly different now. The smooth curve along the shore had turned jagged. Uneven. Honest. I could see sections of the bottom that had not been exposed in years. Dark. Thick. Holding the memory of where the water used to sit. A bird landed near the edge, confused for a second, then adjusted. Even nature noticed before the people did. By 5, more cars arrived. Doors slammed. Voices carried. Energy picked up. Coolers. Folding rods. Kids half awake but excited. The event was starting to come alive. And the lake was still draining. Quietly. Steadily. Right in front of them. I watched a man walk down toward the shoreline with his son. They stopped for a second. Looked out. The father tilted his head slightly. Not enough to question it. Just enough to register something felt off. Then he kept walking. That hesitation was small. But it was spreading. The surface now sat several feet lower than it had the night before. The dock no longer matched the water. The reflection was broken. The edges exposed. The illusion was starting to crack. And Margaret had not stepped outside yet. The sun broke over the ridge and everything became impossible to ignore. Light hit the shoreline first. Then the dock. Then the empty space where water should have been. People slowed as they walked. Not stopping yet. Just slowing. That was how it started. A pause here. A second look there. I watched it spread across the crowd like a quiet ripple. Confusion does not arrive all at once. It builds. One detail at a time. A man stepped closer to the edge and stopped mid-stride. His boots sank slightly into soft mud that had not been there yesterday. He pulled back fast, looking down like the ground had betrayed him. That was the moment it shifted. The illusion cracked. Kids pointed toward the water. Or what was left of it. The shoreline had pulled back nearly 10 feet now. Maybe more in some sections. The dock sat crooked, one side lower than the other, no longer floating evenly. It looked wrong. Unfinished. Like a prop placed in the wrong scene. Voices started to change. Less excitement. More questions. Short ones. Sharp ones. Was it always like this? Did they drain it? No one had answers. Not yet. I stayed where I was, above it all, watching how fast certainty turned into doubt. A volunteer tried to wave people forward. Smiling too wide. Talking too fast. That never works. People trust what they see, not what they are told. And what they were seeing did not match what they were promised. A woman holding a fishing rod stepped closer to the waterline and just stood there. She looked out across the shrinking surface, then back toward the check-in table. Her expression did not change much. but her shoulders did. Slight drop. Subtle. That was disappointment settling in. The kind you cannot fix with explanations. I checked the lake again. The drop had continued through sunrise. Slower now, but still moving. The exposed ground had widened into patches of dark, cracked earth. The smell had changed too. Stronger. Less like water. More like something that had been covered too long, finally meeting air again. Margaret stepped out from behind the table right then. Clipboard still in hand. Same posture. But the smile was gone. Not completely. Just thinner. Tighter. She walked toward the shoreline with measured steps, heels careful on uneven ground. That was new. She stopped halfway and looked. Out across the lake. Really looked this time. I saw it in the way her head tilted. The way her eyes tracked the missing waterline. The way she did not speak for a few seconds longer than she should have. That silence told me everything. Someone approached her, asking something I could not hear. She responded, but slower now. Less certain. She pointed toward the far side of the lake like there was an explanation waiting over there. There was not. More people gathered near the edge. Phones came out. Pictures. Videos. The narrative was already shifting. What was supposed to be an event was turning into something else. Something they did not plan for. I stepped a little closer down the ridge, not enough to be seen clearly, but enough to hear the tone change. The word refund floated up through the air. Then, what happened? Then, is this safe? That last one mattered. Because once safety is questioned, control disappears. Margaret turned back toward the table, faster now. Clipboard held tighter. She started giving instructions. Redirecting. Adjusting. Trying to recover something that was already gone. But every movement she made only drew more attention to what was missing. The lake did not need to disappear completely. It just needed to be different enough that no one believed the story anymore. I looked out across the water one more time. The surface was smaller now. Contained. Honest. No banners. No signs. No claims could change that. And for the first time since this started, I saw Margaret stop moving completely. Just for a second. Standing there, looking at something she could not explain. I watched her realize it. Not all at once. It came in pieces. First the shoreline. Then the dock. Then the way people stopped asking her questions and started looking past her. That was the shift. Authority does not disappear loudly. It fades when people stop believing. Margaret stepped forward again, this time faster, like movement alone could fix what she was seeing. She called out to someone near the water. Her voice carried, but it did not land the same way anymore. Too sharp. Too late. A man shook his head before she even finished speaking. That told me everything. I moved a little closer down the ridge, close enough to see her expression clearly now. The smile was gone completely, replaced by calculation. She was searching for an explanation she could use. Something that sounded official. Something that could hold the crowd together. But the lake did not give her anything to work with. It just kept exposing more ground. The waterline dropped another inch. Then another. Slow. Quiet. Certain. A volunteer approached her with a stack of tickets still in hand. They said something quick. Urgent. She took the stack, looked at it, then looked back at the lake. That hesitation again. Longer this time. The kind that tells you the plan is breaking faster than you can adjust. I could hear more voices now. Louder. Less patient. A group near the check-in table started pointing toward the shoreline, then toward the banners, then back at Margaret. The connection had been made. What was promised no longer matched what was there. And people do not tolerate that for long. I glanced at the dock again. One corner had settled unevenly into the lowering water. Not dangerous. Just wrong. Enough to make it clear something fundamental had changed. The reflection beneath it was gone entirely now. Just broken light on shallow water. Honest. Unforgiving. Margaret walked back toward the table, flipping through papers like something in there would fix this. Permits, schedules, plans. None of it mattered now. Paper does not hold water in place. I could see it in the way she moved. Faster, shorter steps. Control, but slipping. She stopped suddenly and turned back toward the lake again, like she expected it to correct itself if she looked at it long enough. It did not. It kept dropping. Steady. Indifferent. A man stepped forward and said something louder this time. Others joined in. Not shouting. Just enough volume to carry weight. Questions layered over each other. Demands forming underneath. The word, refund, came back again. More than once now. That was the tipping point. Because once money is involved, people stop waiting for explanations. They want answers. Immediate. Margaret raised her hand slightly, trying to settle the crowd. That gesture had worked before. I could tell. But not now. Not with the lake pulling away right in front of them. She started speaking again, slower, choosing each word carefully. But even from this distance, I could see the problem. She did not know what to say. Because the truth was not in her paperwork. It was behind the dam. I looked out across the lake one last time. The surface had stabilized now. Smaller. Contained. Exactly where the system had set it. No chaos. No damage. Just correction. Precise. Controlled. Final. I turned my gaze back to Margaret. She was still talking. Still trying to hold something together that no longer existed. And for a brief second, her eyes moved past the crowd, up toward the ridge. Toward me. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. Like she finally understood there was a part of this she had never considered.